good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name is Rick Adams. I am the CEO here at Practical CSM, and a very, very warm welcome here to everybody. Thank you for joining, and we are continuing our look at the Practical CSM framework, and this month we've got up to phase 5, adoption implementation. So that is our plan for today. We're going to be looking at adoption implementation. So welcome everybody. Please do join in. We have chat available. So if you have any questions at any time as I'm going through the material, please feel free to jump in and ask questions in the chat window, and I will do my best to pick those up. Also, if you have any comments or observations, perhaps you've tried out something yourself that we're discussing and have something useful to tell people, feel free to do so. If you disagree with me, or if you have any other ideas that are relevant to the topic being discussed, feel free to join in and add those in. You'd be very welcome to do so. Thank you very much indeed. As I say, particularly if you've got any questions, if you've got a question, do ask. I think it really does help lift the training if there are questions from the participants. So you're more than welcome to do that. So let me share my screen, and you can see I've got my presentation there. And I'm just going to open up the chat window again to make sure that I can see that. Let me just create some space for that on my window. Lovely. Okay, and I think we're good to go. So, all right, let's make a start. Okay, so we've got an hour together on the Practical CSM framework, phase 5, adoption implementation. So if you haven't met me before, there's some details about me there. As mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder here at Practical CSM. We do training focusing on customer success management. I'm also the author of the book Practical Customer Success Management, which you can get from Amazon. If you're interested in our training, do visit us at practicalcsm.com if you haven't already. If this is your first time with us, then a very warm welcome to you if you haven't met me before. Okay, so what are we going to focus on? Well, in this series, this is one of the phases of my Practical CSM framework. The series, obviously, we're going through each phase one by one. Each time we do start just with a few slides just on the framework itself. If you're going through every single one, you'll have heard this already. Time to make yourself a quick coffee whilst I go through it. I will be very brief, I promise, just 3 minutes or something like that on using a framework. And then we'll get down to, and apologies, that should say phase 5, adoption implementation, my fault. But the list there then is correct. What happens in phase 5, the role of adoption implementation, the different roles, how to manage people, how to manage projects, the project management life cycle, project management core principles, and targets, baselines, and milestones. So the title there is wrong. I should say phase 5, adoption implementation. My apologies. I copied it from last time, and obviously I forgot to adjust the title there. But the actual list of content is correct. Okay, good. So that's that. So let's kick off with that initial section on using a framework. So as you'll be familiar with, if you've seen this before, the concept here is let's not reinvent the wheel. As Sir Isaac Newton said, the reason why he could go ahead and do his scientific work and come up with his Principia Mathematica was by standing on the shoulders of giants. Rather than have to go back to first fundamental principles and work from there, he could go forward from what was already known and what was already discovered to discover something new. And the same thing here, rather than you have to do all the work yourself by working out what's best in customer success management, well, why not use what's already known to be best in customer success management, that's been tried, that's been tested, and that's been put together as a framework of best practice. And then instead of having to work out what to do and how to do it, just get ahead and do it. And that's the point of obviously of using a framework. Now, is it going to get you exactly where you want to go? Well, if you're very lucky, it might, but for the majority of us, it will get us most of the way there and be pretty much exactly what's needed, but not absolutely exactly what's needed for you in your particular unique situation, given the company that you work for, with the products that it has, with the strategy that it has, with the maturity of the customer success team and what you need to do for customer success, with the type of customers you have and the products you've got and so on. It's going to get you 80% or so of the way, but the 15-20% that's that you're going to need to still customize to make it exactly what you want. But the heavy lifting's done. The 80% or more is done for you, and that really is what we're saying. Is it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than starting with nothing done and having to work from nothing, ground up. You've got 80% done for you, and it needs a bit of customization and tweaking because you are who you are, your customers are who they are, etc. But what it is a framework. It's a structure that is already pre-built and in place that's going to hold everything together. It's got already got all the process in there, and yes, it's going to need some customization and adjustment, but pretty much by and large, it's there and ready to use. Pre-created responses to the challenges, step-by-step guidance on when and how to perform them. The documents and the resources you need it are there and ready, and it's published so that everyone can access it. The training is available from my company. You can take all your teams through the training, and then at the end, everybody's qualified and certified, and they know what they're doing, and you're hitting the ground running, and you're much, much more productive and effective as an individual CSM, and indeed, of course, as a team, if there's a team of you as well. So it helps to ensure you do the right things to the right quality in the right order at the right time. Here is the practical CSM framework. There are 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3. There are 7 phases, starting with preparation, going around the outside to value realization, and the 7th being engagement evaluation around the outside, plus a central repository. That is the framework. That's all documented in my book that you can access, Practical Customer Success Management. And in fact, we do provide chapter 1 for free as a PDF. If you go to our website, you can see there that Gerald has put a link in the chat about the book there on our Practical CSM framework. So more information on the book there, obviously from Amazon or from the website. So what does it do? Make sure that it helps you to deliver a high quality service, because you're going to use tried and trusted best practice. You're going to be able to deliver it consistently as an individual and consistently across all team members. It's going to reduce errors and omissions. It's going to improve and enhance the trust relationships you have with your clients, help you to reduce churn and increase revenue opportunities. It'll help you with your recruiting, your onboarding, your coaching, and your retention of high quality staff. It allows you to scale more easily, and it gives you a competitive advantage because you've got qualified CSMs on your team helping your customers compared to your competitors. These are the 3 phases: initial, user readiness, and ongoing. And within those, there are the phases then. So in initial stage, we have the first 2 phases, preparation and commitment. So that's initialization, getting ourselves sort of ready to go and getting the clients ready to go. Then there's a user readiness stage, and we're at the final part of that in phase 5, adoption implementation. Beforehand, we'll have done the onboarding and the adoption planning. So that's where we are today at phase 5 there. And then we'll be moving into the ongoing stage, which is phase 6, value realization. And as we mentioned, phase 7, engagement evaluation is the final phase. So that's where we are throughout it. We also have the central repository available through all phases, where we store the data and make sure that everyone can, that the data is safe and secure, it is kept up to date, and it is available to everybody who needs it. So there we go. That's what the framework is all about. A very brief summary. Now let's dive into today's work, which is phase 5, adoption implementation. So if you want phases 1 to 4, we've already covered them. We do have them recorded. You should be able to have access to those through our CPD library if you are members of the Practical CSM Academy. And if not, they will come round again. We will be redoing the training on an ongoing basis. But those were 1 to 4 were done in previous months this year, and we'll be doing the remainder, obviously, starting with phase 6 next month. But for now, phase 5, adoption implementation. Let's get cracking. Okay, so what happens at the adoption implementation phase? Well, the last phase, of course, adoption planning, was all about making sure that we knew what needed to go into the plan. And that was all around understanding change management best practice. And we looked very carefully at change management best practice last month when we looked at phase 4 adoption planning. And that was all about having an understanding of who's going to be impacted, in what ways, and how that impact is going to affect them, and what training they would require based upon the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude that they had as an individual and as a group of individuals who had a common need, and they were impacted groups, we called them. And so we developed from that our plan for what we need to communicate, what we need to train, how we need to support, how we need to incentivize and motivate people. And we came up with our plan. And now we need to implement that. So we're actually going to be very practical now and roll our sleeves up and get the job done, get the adoption adopted. Well, that's project management then. So now we need project management skills at this level. So it's not so much a specialist change management skills about what needs to be done as to then the actual project management of how to do it. So we're going to implement our adoption plans that we created, and our users are going to get the communication, the training, the support, and the other resources that we planned for them to get in the previous phase. So it's a very practical phase, this one. It's a get on and get it done and take the least possible time and the least costs to deliver the highest quality as quickly as possible. So why is adoption implementation important? Well, of course, once we've completed the adoption phase, well, then the users have adopted our product and they're starting to use it to generate value. And the quicker we get them through that, the better. Why? Well, because, of course, if we can quickly get them to the point when they're using our product, then we can shorten the length of time before our clients start seeing value being returned from their investment in our product, whatever that might be, our software as a service or whatever it is, our professional services. Our solution that may be a combination of hardware, software, and professional services or managed services, whatever it is, the quicker they can get value from it, the happier the customer will be. The less risk is there for them, and the more ultimately, the more value in total they will get from it because they can start generating value more quickly. So overall value gets increased in the long term as well. So we get a short-term benefit of more quickly starting to see value and a long-term benefit of ultimately more value being created overall. Two unarguably good reasons for wanting high-quality adoption implementation to take place. And by ensuring that happens, then, of course, we get a better relationship with our client, which gives us the best position from which to negotiate contract renewals, upsells, cross-sells, advocacy, and all of these things, and to help us to grow the relationship with our customer and develop and refine that relationship into a better trust relationship over time. So there's lots of value for us to do here. And of course, it's not our project. And it may be that you could say, well, why would we be doing this rather than the client? Surely it's up to the client to implement their adoption. It's their adoption of our product. And you would be right. And that is always the case, really, with the customer success manager. It's a funny role in a way because we are not directly working for or employed by, anyway, the customer. We're employed by the product vendor, the solution provider. And so we're working as a guide, as a helper with the knowledge and experience that we've got as a specialist in our product to help our client to project manage. We're not really the people in charge. We're the helpers and the guides. And we've always got to bear that in mind. But at the same time, someone's got to make sure that this happens. Someone's got to make sure that it's being done. Some of our customers or clients will be better at project management, will be much more clear about what needs to be done and how to do it. Others will be much less so. And so we may find with some of our smaller clients who perhaps don't have project management experience, don't have any dedicated project management type resources or assets to put to this, that they're going to rely more on us and our help to get things done. Whereas maybe some of our larger, more sophisticated, more mature clients are better able to help themselves and implement a sophisticated change to their environments, such as maybe they're going through because they're implementing a big initiative that our product is part of. So we've got to work out what needs to be done and help to fill the gaps, really. And that might be more or less work, as I said, depending upon the level of the client's sophistication. But what we want to do is make sure that as the client goes through this adoption process, that we're up to date, that we've reviewed the adoption plan and the roadmap. We know what needs to be done, and they know what needs to be done. We're going to break it down into small bite-size packages of work that we can assign to get done. And then we're going to sort of manage those little bite-sized chunks through the process of getting them done. And that's an important sort of basic principle of project management. So we need to create an adoption checklist, which would list all the things that need to be done. We can tick them off as they get done and commence the adoption program, allocate time in it to support and to advise and counsel. We would collate and document measurements and compile reports to show where we are in the adoption process at all times, and to manage and make sure that we are ticking things off as they happen, and that as things turn up that we're not expecting as well, that we add that to the list and we deal with those unexpected errors as well as the expected challenges that we can tick off from our checklist. We've got other things that are going to happen that we deal with ad hoc as they come up. And that very much is important. So we've got to retain that flexibility of, we weren't expecting that issue, and now we've uncovered it. We didn't know about it. We need to be able to deal with it. It may include going backwards and forwards between doing things and reporting to decision makers, and particularly where you uncover something new. It may be that you don't have the authority then to go ahead and make a decision about it. Maybe you uncover, for example, a group of users that had not been identified, but that do have change management requirements, and we haven't thought about them, and now we need to, and it's going to have additional cost or time implications, or we need the authority of the team leader to ask for time for that team for them to undergo the training, for example. So that would be examples of where we might need, as it says there in number 8 there, to maybe organize a meeting and have some senior stakeholders in that meeting, take them through what we've uncovered, what our recommended activity is, and then let them make that decision as an example. Okay, so that's the type of thing that we're doing. And the main output, obviously, is a completed adoption program. And we would document that and store it in the central repository to say, look, this is what we did. This is how the order in which we did it. This is the items being signed off as tasks. And this is the result of having accomplished it. So, as mentioned then, the real owner should be the customer, and we want them to be. Now, there are times when actually the customer might even be paying as a professional service for us to take over the adoption and do it on their behalf. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's great. So if that's something that you offer as a professional service, then you might actually be being paid for it, as a separate billable professional service. Or it might be that that your particular software or other service that they have purchased is particularly sophisticated, is particularly complex, and is particularly unique. And so it really does need a lot of your input. And so you would tend anyway to take more of a forward leading role in the project management. But by and large, for most of us as CSMs, we are, as we said, advisors and helpers. And so what we're doing here is we are going to allow that customer to put forward their project manager, who could be the SPL, senior project lead, as we defined in previous courses that we've gone through, the senior project lead, the person who is the principal person at their side who's been appointed to make this happen. They may be the project manager, or with a larger implementation, a larger company, they may appoint actual, real project managers, people who are trained, qualified PMs. That's what they do. So we've got the senior project lead, who is more of a business decision maker, and then we've got one or more project managers working under them to actually get the work done. And that would be ideal and great. And if they are, we need to identify those, introduce ourselves early on as the CSM and say, we'd love to work with you, and then work with them and let them do as much as they can, much better that they do it than we do it, because, well, if you're doing it, that's costing time, and time is money. And so if they can do it, far better. But we're going to sort of help them to make sure they haven't forgotten anything, help them to make sure that they're covering everything adequately, doing the right things in the right order, because we have an interest, right? That's the whole point here. We want them to have a successful adoption. So we want to help to make sure the standard is good. The customers' stakeholders will almost always be much deeper and more profound in their understanding of their own business and their own requirements, unless they're brand new to the company, which does happen, right? I've just been employed and this is my first task as a newly employed person. That's entirely possible. But generally speaking, we look to them to understand what they need to do and who in their company is in charge of which resources and who we need to therefore get permission to do things and so on. What we're going to bring in is the understanding of our product in the context of what they are trying to achieve, and therefore, what types of training or what types of support, incentivization and motivation, how we should communicate to that sort of group of users their needs, what are the different ways in which they might be trained, and make recommendations for all of that. And of course, a lot of that we would have done in the adoption planning in phase 4. And now we're moving more to the project management, which is the actual getting it done. Similarly, then they will then be hopefully taking a lead in the proactive getting it done, making sure it's done and ticking things off. But we are there checking, nagging, coaching, encouraging, helping out. Has this been done? This is the next thing. Look, let's set dates for this. Let's make sure people are aware of it who need to be aware of it. And then having done it, let's check, did it get done? Was it to the right standard? Can we now sign it off and tick it off and move forwards? That type of thing. So we want to work with the client. We want them to take on as much as possible. We're going to need them to do certain things, because we can't go into their business, again, because we're not employed by them and don't have the authority necessarily to go into the business and make Team X undergo a day of training in the classroom that has been identified as being needed. But somebody has to make sure that team does take that training. So are we reminding them that the next thing is we need to organize training for Team X? Remember, it's a day of training, so they're going to need time out of the business and so on and so forth. Whatever needs to be done, we're there reminding them. And actually, this brings me to the next point here, which you can see on the slide. When it comes to project management, it's worth identifying that one of the biggest areas of project management is people management. Managing people, critical skill for all project managers, and indeed for customer success managers, and indeed any team leader of any kind, any professional. Managing people is so important, because at the end of the day, nothing gets done without people. And we need to be not just working ourselves, but working as a team with others and encouraging, helping, leading, communicating, training, evangelizing, explaining, and motivating, and incentivizing. Have I missed anything? And generally being there, not just to do it ourselves, but to ensure that everyone else is pulling their weight and doing what they need to be done as well. So we are very much managers of people as well as managers of the project. Within the bracket of people, we could divide that up and say, well, there's two sort of particular areas. One is the key stakeholders. So stakeholders are the people who have a concern in the outcome. And they could be, for example, the people who are paying for this. It could be the people who decided that it would happen. So they might be senior decision makers. They want to know, is this going ahead? Is it going ahead to the right sort of at the right speed, to the right quality, in the right time frames? Are we getting the result we want from this? Is it doing what we expected it to do? Is everyone behaving? Is everybody doing what we asked them to do? Are there any problems? Okay. The other key stakeholders might be the owners of the capabilities and the teams. So the team leaders and the department heads who, because this company has now purchased our product, they're doing things differently now. They used to use a different product or a different methodology, which had its own process. Now they've got to implement a new process that uses our product. It might be similar. It might be very different to what they've done before. It might be a brand new process that they weren't doing previously. And so it's brand new to the entire company. Or it could be an amended process that's slightly different. So have they amended or created the process? Is it all documented? Have they worked out what training needs to be done? Have they now done the training? And this is the bit, obviously, that's moving from planning to implementation, from phase 4 to phase 5. Is it now the moment to do this? If so, let's get it done. And then has it been done? And let's tick it off. That's really what we're doing each time here. And it may be that this is the moment now where we go to some of these other key stakeholders who are not to do with the project, but to do with the capabilities. And we're going to them and asking their permission, saying, right, it is now time to train your group of users. I need to work with you now to get your permission to do so and get your agreement as to when and how that actually happens, and get it diarized, and then get it happening, and then get it measured and get it ticked off. So then that brings us, of course, to the second type of people, which is that individual who is the actual end user of our product, or the end user of something else that is impacted by our end users, but the impacted users, the people who are actually going to carry out that process to achieve the outcomes, to achieve the outputs that end up as being outcomes. So are we managing them, or indeed at third hand, are we ensuring as a project manager, or indeed as an advisor to the project manager, that these users are being handled, that the training has gone ahead, that it did then happen on the right day, or that the end users, if it's self-study, have done it now and have gone through and completed it, and if necessary that they've proven their capability by being tested, or by being observed, or by having a sign off from a manager. Whatever's relevant that we've decided in phase 4 planning now needs to happen. Did it happen to the right standard at the right time? So again, working with the impacted users themselves and checking to make sure that everyone knows what they're meant to be doing, that they then do it when they should, and that we then tick it off afterwards. Okay, so there's our people management. And of course, there's also, alongside people management of the project itself and moving the project forwards, which again, it's a critical skill, is people management. It's one of the biggest aspects of project management. But more widely, then we need some basic project management skills to move this forwards. And as we said earlier, some of our smaller customers might need a bit more of this. Some of the larger ones don't need our help in this, maybe at all. They're going to do this quite happily. And all we're doing really is asking the question, can I just check have you now completed this phase of the adoption? Have you trained this group of users on this process, and have you tested to make sure that they're okay now, for example? And then you're just ticking the boxes. And that's what we want. Ideally, is a box ticking exercise, and they're doing the actual work, and we're just checking. Okay, and guiding and advising. If they say, well, no, we're ready now to do it, but do you recommend we do it like this or like that? Because maybe we've been there before for other companies who are also, who had previously implemented our product and have a particular training need that this company now has, and we've given them the advice as to how to actually do it. So we need to understand the concept in project management of the project management life cycle. So what's the project management life cycle? Well, there's 5 phases or steps, if you like, however you want to look at it, within the project management life cycle. So initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and performance, and closure. So each one of those, let's just very briefly define what these different phases of a project are that a project manager would go through. So as the project manager, you kick off with initiation. That is making sure we understand what we're trying to achieve, the goals, the deadlines, the priorities, and the risks. Have we clearly defined what do we want at the end? Having done that, we move to planning, which is, okay, well, if that's what we want at the end, what do we need to do? Clarity over the tasks, dividing them up into small, discrete units of tasks that we can actually then implement, and determining the timeline. In what order should we do them, and how long will it take? Then we move to phase 3 of the project management life cycle. Do those things. Here's the list. We've planned it. Now we do it, which is very much like 2 and 3 of this is very much like our adoption planning and adoption implementation, phases 4 and 5 of the customer success framework, isn't it? And then also in our phase 5, the phase we're doing right now, we also have monitoring and performance. Through the entire life cycle of the project, are we making sure that we do things to the right standard? Are we making sure that they get done and we can tick them off? And then closure, analyze, summarize, and report back to the people who paid for all of this to say, good news, sir, madam, it's done to a satisfactory standard, it's done within the time frame, it's done within the costs, and it's done to the quality required. Okay, and now we can sign off. So that's our project management life cycle. That's what we need to be aiming for as we move forwards. We want to get through to those as quickly as possible. And there are some core principles that can help us with that. And the first one of those is objectives. Be really clear who decides what needs to be done. They are often referred to as the sponsors. And there may be one of them, in which case it's a lot easier, because if there's multiple sponsors, do they agree on what needs to be done? And if they don't agree, then we cannot go ahead and do it, because they haven't yet decided between them what it is. You can't do it if you don't know what it is. Have they agreed this is what we need to do? Or are they still, arguing between themselves as to what needs to be done? So who is the person, or who are the people who are deciding what this project does and doesn't include, what it is doing? Have they given us a clear, unambiguous briefing? And the way to check that is by briefing them back. So they brief us, and then we brief them back and say, okay, I want to check. Tell me, is this correct? This is what you want. And if not, what do you need to do to get to that stage where you have got a clear, unambiguous briefing that everybody has signed up to and agreed? So that's the first step. Don't proceed until you're clear. Okay. So that's our first one. And how would we do that? Well, the rule of thumb is, have we, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, for every outcome that they want, have we defined it with 3 aspects: a quality, a quantity, and a deadline? So, for example, a quality might be naming the team that must be trained and what they must be trained in. The quantity is maybe how many people are in that team, and the deadline is when that team must have received that training and have been tested and assessed to be adequate performers now in the new task that they have. You can go further than that and use SMART objectives. So rather than just have three aspects, a quality, a quantity, and a deadline for each outcome that's required for this project, if you want, you could go as far as going with five of those, five aspects. For each objective, are they specific about it? Is it something that can be measured? Is it something we can actually take action on? Is it something that realistically can be done given the resources and availability that we have? And have they put a deadline to it? So that would be a level of a little bit more sophistication if we want to use that. So that's our SMART objective. So that's number one. So number two then is resources as a core principle. So we need to understand what's available to us in terms of helping us get this project completed. Who is going to do the work? What equipment, what facilities, how much money, what materials, that are expendable. So we've got those types of resources that we need to consider, and some practical considerations about, well, what's needed to perform these activities. So for example, again, training is something that very commonly is going to be needed. So what do we need for that training? Do we need a classroom? Do we need a trainer? Do we need a presentation? Do we need access to the software? Do we need a dummy server with dummy data on it? Or can we use the live one? What are the implications of using the live one? What are the security implications of it, for example? So those are some examples of sort of considerations around resources for training. What skill sets are required for the trainer? They've got to have product knowledge and the ability to train and communicate and to be a good teacher. How many resources? In what languages, for example? Which languages does the trainer need to talk? When do they start? When do they finish? Are they available on demand? Or, for example, is this an internal instructor, or is this a third-party instructor that's paid for when on a day rate and may not be available every day? They may only have certain availability in their schedule. So we've got to think about all of those sorts of practical considerations around the resources that we have. In which days are rooms available to do classroom training, or are we going to do it online? Do we have the resource from a financial point of view to do classroom training, which typically costs more than online? If we're going to do online training, do we have self-study materials? Okay, so that's our resources. Principle number three then is scope. So this is something that is like a bugbear for many people who get involved in getting things done, is they agree to get things done, and then as they move forwards getting those things done, the people who are the sponsors keep adding more work and saying, oh, well, actually, could you also do this? And, well, when I said that, I also meant this. And, well, let's do this extra little bit. There's hardly any extra work. Let's do it. And then that is often defined as scope creep. So what we need to be clear about at the beginning is what is in and what is out of scope for this phase, at least, of the implementation or of the initiative that the client is doing, or indeed what they need to be clear on. We're helpers, remember. So we need to make sure that is clear and understood what the project is, what it is not. What we're, are we going to be in phase one? Are we going to be delivering all of it, or are we just training the head office, or are we doing all offices? Are we doing all regions, or is it just this region, for example? So what's in, what is not in, what's the scope of work for this phase, or let's divide it up into multiple phases and either deal with them one by one, or maybe we need to do a bit of program management for all phases to work out what needs to go into each of those phases. So then anyway, you need to come up with a definitive list and description for this is what the scope is, this is what must be done. We don't do any more than that. And again, that's clear because we don't have the time. These are the things that need to be done. And then that becomes our project plan. So that's important. So for the scope management, planning for scope management, the project plan. You could also, if you wanted to get fancier, use some other basic principles of project management, a project charter, and stakeholder input to define those things. Collect the requirements based on that, define the scope, create the WBS, which is the work breakdown structure, which we'll talk about in a minute, and validate that it's correct by passing it through the experts as necessary. Is this the right training for your team? Is this the right support that they need? Have we incentivized? Would this communication be acceptable to them? Are they going to be able to do what we want? And then you need to control it. You need to actually manage it happening. So that's what happens in scope. So to do scope, we need to be clear on the requirements. The requirements are simply taking the scope and breaking it into a set of actionable deliverables. And an actionable deliverable just means a task that needs to be done that has a definable beginning and ending. And that means that we can sort of give it as a discrete task to somebody to do, and then we can check afterwards to see if it was done or not. So the requirements process is the dividing up of the entire scope into a set of actionable deliverables. That way, we've got traceability now. We've got here are they all the deliverables. We can put them in the right order. We can determine how long each one takes. We can then start doing them, and we can monitor doing it and tick them off. As you can see, requires customer and user collaboration and must be agreed and approved by the customer. It's up to them to say these are the right actionable deliverables. Then we can schedule them. So that's where this work breakdown structure comes in that we saw a moment ago. And we can then, once they're scheduled, we can start doing them. So the work breakdown structure is simply that list of specific actionable deliverables that covers the scope, put into the right order. So the work breakdown structure puts things into the right order. What's the right order? Well, the order that makes the most sense to do them in based upon the needs. And those are our tasks. Okay, so we can take a look at what we mean by a task. A task is a specific activity with, as I said, a defined input, action, and output. We can allocate it to a person or a group of people to say, please perform this task, like please train this group of users. And it can be allocated the right time and resources. Here's a room to do it in. Here's the PowerPoint presentation. Here's the workbook, and here's the list of users you need to train. We can measure it. We can have a training evaluation form at the end, for example. And it is the atomic structure of a project. It is here's a discrete unit of thing to be done, a task. Okay, so that's what it is. And there may be dependencies, and that's really important because this is how we determine in the schedule in what order to do them. Well, it might be that it's helpful because a certain person who's required is not available for another couple of months to only do the tasks that person needs to do later, and to have other tasks performed now that we can get on with because that person isn't needed and they're not available yet. So that might be why we do some tasks now and some later, but others might actually have a very hard dependency. So for example, you can't train users in a new process until you have written the process and checked it and published it. So task one is to write the new process or amend the existing process to be correct for the new way of working. And then task two is train the users in the new process. You can't train the users in the new process if you haven't written the new process patently. So that is a dependency. Okay, you've got to then allow for that in the schedule. So it might look like this. You've got an overall project divided into multiple phases. Each phase is divided into multiple deliverables, and then within each deliverable, you do your tasks in priority order based upon the best way that you think needs to be done, including if there are any dependencies, but also just any priorities, perhaps. If we do this, this frees up somebody else more quickly. That's really good because they're a really valuable resource, for example. So you've got to decide. That's the whole sort of art, if you like, of project management, what order these tasks need to be done. But at the end, this work breakdown structure, WBS, that we're looking at, these are all the discrete tasks here in the darker color. That is what gets done in the order that needs to be done. And that comes back to this concept here of our tasks and our work breakdown structure, phases, deliverables, and tasks here, and then phases, deliverable, and tasks here. So what might that look like? Well, let's say we were manufacturing a car. Well, there might be 3 parts to that. First, we've got to do our planning, then we've got to do the manufacturing, and then we've got to do the selling. Okay. Within the planning phase, we'll divide that into a research deliverable and a design deliverable. Within the manufacturing, we'll break that into an engine deliverable and a body deliverable, and within the selling, we've only just got there just the marketing. Obviously, there could well be others as well. Maybe we don't do the selling ourselves. We get third-party companies who actually do the selling, and we only do the marketing as the manufacturer. So in the planning, we had these 2 deliverables of research and design. Within the research deliverable, then we've got a set of tasks in the order that needs to be done. Can you see how this really helps? It's so logical. If we can use this with our client, so, okay, fine, that's manufacturing a car, and you can see how project management will work with that, Rick. But yeah, that's not the same as what we're doing. All right, so what about what we do? Here's an example of using the work breakdown structure as a customer success manager in your own job. So the job is to get customer renewals. You've got onboarding, adoption, and value realization to be done as the sort of the major phases. And within the onboarding phase, we're going to create a couple of deliverables of research and commitment. And then within those, we'll create various tasks of researching the customer, getting their commitment. Then we'll move through to the adoption phase. And then we've got planning and implementation to do. And then within planning, we've got a set of tasks, and implementation, which we're doing now, a set of tasks, and then value realization with measurement and reporting. So again, examples there. So as we sort of move towards the close here, what you will see from all of this then is that as we move forwards, we follow the plan that we create, that we are documenting, in order to tick off what needs to be done. And as we said earlier, if you remember, it may be best laid plans of mice and men, that as we enact the plan, we uncover things that we find we can't do it how we thought we'd do it, or we need to do other things that we hadn't realized would need to be done. So there may be some amendments as we move forwards. So we need to have the plan, but we need to have a little bit of flexibility around the plan as well. So we've got that to consider. And then as we move forwards, we are doing it and we're ticking off the items. Has this been done to the right standard? How do we know? We've got to ask, or we've got to measure. Okay, we've got to check whatever the right way of checking that particular task is done. Ask the person, did you do it? Maybe that's all that's needed. Or test the user to make sure they can now do a thing. Or test to make sure something is in place. Okay, so whatever the right way of checking that something is done, that's what you do. So that's that last bit here of measurement, targets, baselines, and milestones. So we need to agree with this. How are we going to measure all of this ahead of time, so that as we move forwards with the plan, we can then do that measurement that we agreed. And then because ahead of time we agreed that if we can train everybody to a level where they can take the test And if they get 70% or higher, that is acceptable. Then we can give them a test and see if they get 70% or higher. And if they do, then box ticked, we've now trained them. So we need to know what the baseline is. We need to know what the correct level is to accomplish for each thing. So we need to work that out, our baselines, our targets, and our milestones. And well, there we are. And that's the final bit. So, and again, apologies, it's just a repeat of that previous slide. That should say phase 5 adoption implementation there. So the detail is correct. It's just that I copied and pasted the slide across and I forgot to do the that subtitle there. But the key learning points then that we've covered. Using a framework, as normal, the purpose of a framework and a breakdown of the practical CSM framework and why use it. We covered that. But then we got into, for the main part of today, the phase 5 adoption implementation. We looked at what happens in phase 5. We looked at the adoption implementation roles. We looked at managing people. We looked at managing projects. We looked at the project management life cycle. Remember, we had the 5 phases of the project management life cycle, and we spent a good bit of time on the project management core principles, the fundamental things that you need to make sure you're getting right in order to work through this work. And then finally finishing just a little bit there on the targets, baselines, and milestones. So we're actually a little bit ahead of time, but that's, partly I think, because we didn't have any questions. So if you have got any questions, well, now's your final opportunity to ask them, please. And we are finishing a few minutes earlier than normal, but as I said, we haven't had any questions, which is sort of why. I always like questions, so I really do invite them. If you've got any questions, now is your opportunity to ask them. And whilst you're doing so, just to let you know that the training evaluation is there for you, practicalcsm.com/training-evaluation. And you can also get a free copy of our framework guide if you follow the URL you see there. And you can also book onto future events by going to practicalcsm.com/events and sign up for our newsletter if you go to /newsletter, which will be quite useful because then you'll know what events are happening each month. So you might want to do that. And the final thing I have to let you know is that if you use the code webinar35, then for the next 5 days, you can have a 35% off discount on all our online training content as a special offer for all who attend our webinars. So webinar 35. So this is recorded, and you will get a copy or a link to the recording, I guess I should say, in the next day or so. But practicalcsm.com/shop, and then the code webinar35 is what you need for that. And I think I've covered everything, except, of course, just to say, I'll just go back to that training evaluation. Please complete the training evaluation. This helps us to understand, did you enjoy this? Did you find it beneficial and useful? How can we improve? What else would you like us to cover in the future? Because we don't just do the practical CSM framework, of course. So please tell us all about that with the training evaluation. And then there's the code again, webinar 35, all capital letters, and practicalcsm.com/shop to use that to get 35% off our training courses. Good. So I'm going to draw things to a close. There's not been any questions at all from anybody. Well, never mind. Sometimes we get loads, don't we, Gerald? But not today. We got exactly 0. So perhaps it was just all clear to everybody. Let's hope that that's the case. So thank you all very much indeed. I hope it's been useful, and I look forward to this time roughly next month, in a month's time. So roughly halfway through the month, and we'll be looking obviously at the next phase. That's phase 6, which is value realization. And that, of course, is a very important phase. This is the one that the customer is most interested in, is how we share the value that they are creating with them and report back with quarterly business reviews and things like that. So Phase 6 value realization next time. Enrique, good. You know what? I'm just so pleased you said that. Enrique de Silva there just said, thank you for the session. Extremely insightful. Really appreciate that. Thank you. It's nice to know there's someone out there. So thank you for that, Enrique. And you're very welcome. And I hope many others got benefit as well. That's it for today. I will see you next month, or indeed, obviously, we have other stuff coming up as well. Do check at events there for all our other events as well. Otherwise, I'll see you next month for phase 6. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye for now.